So one of Ukraine's major innovations in this war is the drone wall. But did you know that Russia has one too? I mean, they literally went with the same name, but instead of a defensive focus, it's designed to assist offensive operations in a few key areas of the front, namely Pokrovsk and Kupiansk. Today, we're joined by Rob Lee and Dmytro Putiata to discuss their newest article breaking down this Russian tactic and other significant changes they've noticed in recent months. Rob is a senior fellow at the Foreign Policy Research Institute with extensive experience tracking the war in Ukraine, and Dima is a Ukrainian veteran, having served in special operations, marine, and drone units, where he fought in Avdiivka, Kursk, Liman, and elsewhere. Now, these two have started a new free publication on Substack covering developments in the war from tactics to technology, unit structure, lessons learned, and more. So be sure to check out their work at Two Marines. That'll be at the link in the description below. And with that, let's get to the conversation. All right, Rob, Dima, appreciate you guys taking the time. I know there's about a million different directions we could take this right now. You've got the new Substack launch, which is awesome. We'll have that linked below. I really like the weekly updates. There's a monthly roll-up of Battlefield updates, and then I saw a weekly one just pop out yesterday, so that's awesome. But today, we're going to dive into this Russian drone line experiment because I haven't really heard about it much before. So maybe, Rob, start us off. What are we looking at here?
Sure. So, both sides, obviously, right, both sides are kind of leading modern warfare and drone employment. They're trying to figure out how are you most effective and efficient while employing drones, both reconnaissance and strike capabilities. And of course, the structural changes are very, very new. They're constantly kind of changing. And so the employment, the kind of methods are changing too. So last summer, Russia had a couple different experiments of how to best employ, UAS. Russian military is constantly trying to determine the most effective methods. They're constantly trying to take data and determine, how can we employ FPVs, MOLNI, other types of UAVs more effectively. And so this is one of those kind of avenues where they're trying to improve the system. So, there are two combined arms armies. The second, which is part of Center Group of Forces, which is operating in the Pokrovsk direction last year, and 6th Combined Arms Army, which is operating up in the Kupiansk direction as part of Western Group of Forces. So for 2nd Combined Arms Army, basically they divided up the front line. They had about 32 kilometers of frontage of the army, and instead of having the FPV teams, Mavic teams, so on from every regiment brigade kind of responsible for the brigade area, they instead kind of pulled it across the army. And so for the entire army, again, about 32 kilometers of frontage, they divided up in 3 echelons. The first echelon was from 0 to 5 kilometers past the forward line of enemy troops. The second was from 5 to 10 past the forward line of enemy troops, or front line. And the last was more than 10 kilometers. And basically, they divide up these zones. For the first, from 0 to 5, is usually about 3 kilometers wide, 0 to 5 kind of in depth. And then I think it was about 4 kilometers on average for that second echelon. And basically, the idea was to try and give the UAV units specific kind of sectors of flight, right? This is where you're supposed to do reconnaissance. They had specific kind of target priorities. And for the first grouping is mostly, I think, motorized rifle, kind of tank UAS units for the first 0 to 5 kilometers. From 5 to 10 is often Spetsnaz, artillery, reconnaissance units. And then anything beyond 10 kilometers past the front line, it was assigned to Rubicon. And so Rubicon is this kind of center unmanned systems forces with very elite combat detachments. And because they have this very high quality and very, very well funded, they can operate at much greater depths than normal units can. And so this is kind of their way of breaking down the kind of front and to try and make sure that the entire front is covered as effectively as possible. So this is initially tested early last summer. The same time, 6th Combined Arms Army up in the Kupiansk direction. They also experimented with the system, but they had a different kind of breakdown. So they basically had from 0 to 5 kilometers past the flat. Then the next zone was 5 to 25, and then from 25 to 35. And in this case, they also broke down, how many UAVs could be used per day. Certain UAVs for certain sectors, like Lancets for deeper from the front line than FPVs. And basically, this is also their idea of how to most effectively kind of employ UAS. So again, both armies both experimented with a drone line concept, but coming to different kind of conclusions about how to do it best. And they're constantly tinkering too. So the size would kind of change, the number of sectors would change, but that kind of continued to develop. And then for 2nd Combined Arms Army, after that initial experiment, the entire Center Group of Forces decided to kind of scale that themselves. And so they also broke down across the group of forces of, each army had a certain number of sectors. They did the same thing, 0 to 5, 5 to 10, and more than 10. And in their case, from beyond 10 kilometers, it was either assigned to Rubicon detachments or to Spetsnaz brigades, so 3rd and 24th. And again, same idea. They had, for last fall, Center Group of Forces was really the main priority of Russia's efforts. So that's where the naval infantry brigades were assigned. 8th Combined Arms Army was assigned there, 68th Army Corps. These are not typical units for the Central Military District. And they also really reinforced Rubicon attachments. So you had Rubicon, like Center, Rubicon Dnieper, Rubicon, I think maybe East, and also Rubicon 7 and 8. So you had this really significant reinforcement of all these attachments. But, I think one of the important things to kind of conclude from this is that despite this kind of experimentation, despite this reinforcement in that direction, Russia ultimately didn't really advance very fast, right? Ukraine was able to kind of develop effective countermeasures. Despite this reinforcement, Ukraine was able to hold. So it's very interesting of kind of this, early style of drone warfare of how they're trying to employ it, how they're trying to make it more effective and efficient. It's constantly being tinkered with, but neither side, I think, has really developed yet, the perfect kind of, system yet. And they're still kind of developing it right now.
Well, you use the term drone wall here, and that makes sense when you're talking about the Ukrainian defensive line. The wall doesn't move, right? Russia's trying to run up against this wall, and they're having a hard time getting past it. It feels weird to use the same terminology for these are offensive operations. So it's trying to support maneuver in a sense. I know it's very loose with how we're describing Russian maneuver warfare at this point, but maybe Dima, how different is this then from what Ukraine has done when we use the term drone wall?
Well, I would say that both sides are moving in totally different ways, and we are developing, for example, Ukrainian side pays more attention in terms of increasing striking capabilities against different types of Russian targets, while in the same time Russia pays, I would say, maybe 40% of their, let's say, of their attention to counter our drones. Which is kind of natural because they're advancing and they need to cover their forces. But in the same time, I think that Russian way is a little bit more better than Ukrainian one, because apart from launching a numerous amount of drones, you need to also protect your forces from enemy strikes. And for this year, I know for sure that Russia is trying to build a very big ecosystem, which will involve hundreds of small radar systems. They are creating a radar field. And apart from that, they are increasing the amount of interceptor crews under the army brigade regiment commands. For example, one of the Russian regiments offers to their command to have this structure in which their brigade will have, as far as I remember, approximately 16 interceptor crews per regiment, with 4 or 5 small radar systems, which is literally quite good, frankly speaking. Ukraine is also trying to develop these interceptor crews, especially under battalion command. But unfortunately, we do not pay that much attention to this technical side of the warfare in terms of Elint, Sigint, and those radar systems, which is, in my humble opinion, a big mistake. And I think that for this year, we should focus on Russian targets as like those radar systems, because if they will be able to create this, they will increase the amount of destroyed drones from our side significantly. And we won't be able to be that efficient as we used to be. And right now we are developing those middle strike drones, which shows themselves very efficient. It's not a big deal for us right now to strike Russian logistics 80, 70 kilometers from the front line. For example, today, my friend in Kursk area, they destroyed 3 trucks and 1 Russian Tor system at the depth of 70 kilometers deep from the front line, using quite cheap Ukrainian and American-made middle strike drones with the price like $350. And also they used a German Helsing one with the price of $18,000, which is also cheap, and they performed quite well. And also, for example, last night, we also destroyed 3 or 4 trucks in the Donetsk area, also 65 kilometers from the front line. and with very cheap drones. And what is also crucial is that we are using, apart from cheap kamikaze drones, we are using much cheaper ISR drones. If, for example, in 2023, 2024, we used Ukrainian-made different types of drones with the price of $70,000-$80,000 per each. Right now, we are able to produce cheaper ISRs with the price of $10,000-$12,000 per UAV. So which is in general good, and we significantly decrease the amount of kind of money we are using to destroy quite critical for Russian side targets.
When looking at this drone wall, because this is, you guys mentioned this earlier, but this is coming up on a year old for the Russian tactic of what they tried out here. When we look at the lack of progress in areas across the front in 2025, is it because this drone wall didn't work out as anticipated, or is this just a small component of everything together?
So I would say, to make kind of general brush, Ukraine has led the war in innovation on drones for most of the war, right? And that's mostly out of necessity, because in 2022, 2023, Ukraine was significantly outgunned. They had significantly less ammunition. Artillery was kind of the main weapon, and Ukraine just couldn't compensate. So in 2022 to 2024, Ukraine really led the way with drone employment, drone development, and so on. I think 2025 was a year in which Russia kind of caught up and narrowed the gap. I don't think they advanced past Ukraine, but they started doing some things maybe a little better. And one was, develop a Rubicon, where it's a more professional unit. It's kind of not infected with like kind of Russian military thinking. We had mostly more of a civilian style mindset. But the main thing with Rubicon is that their tasks were very specific, right? So it is, you're not hitting things to the fly. You're going to go after logistics targets and UAS teams 5 kilometers or more past the front line. So right by developing these kind of elite units, tasking them very specifically, when they show up a part of the front line, they come in and really provide a new capability that the regular Russian regiments, brigades are not performing. In Ukraine's case, they created their own drone line first, and actually Russia they literally copied the name. It literally is a response to Ukraine's.
I was going to ask that. Okay.
The two concepts are quite different. And again, this war, there's a constant copying of each side, right? One side does something smart, and that gets copied, and so on. In Ukraine's case, the initial idea behind drone line was that you had a bunch of these very capable UAS units. Most of them were subordinate to maneuver brigades, right? So initially it was a strike drone company. Those became strike drone battalions in 2024. And the idea was basically, well, if we fund some of these battalions even better, they can operate further from the front line than a regular battalion can. And so they decided to raise up the 5 kind of most elite ones or for different choices, and make those into kind of like operational assets. And initially it was part of the ground forces. And the initial plan for drone line was it would expand the kill zone from 10 kilometers past the FLOT to 15. That was the idea. In practice, I don't think it really has happened. And in January, Madhyar kind of came out and said that the average engagement by unmessaged forces is like 1.4 kilometers in front of the front line. And again, his argument is we have to go after infantry to support infantry. But I think what happened was that then you had both the drone line units and the regular kind of UAS platoons and battalions within brigades all focused kind of very, very close to the front line. And instead of maybe owning depth at greater ranges at 10 kilometers, 15, 20 kilometers. That was one way I think Russia kind of maybe narrowed the gap. Maybe they improved a little beyond what Ukraine was doing last year. But I think ultimately Ukraine's got better. They have more talented teams. They have better innovation with UAS capabilities. And in particular, right now, we're seeing a real kind of ramp up right now. I think, as Dima mentioned, FP2s, various kind of loitering munitions that can strike at, more than 50 kilometers past the front line. There's a really significant increase of quality and quantity Ukraine has right now. That's creating really significant problems for Russia. You can see this every day with, air defense systems getting struck, warehouses, command posts, all sorts of things. That's a really important kind of development. It's not clear that Russia has a great kind of answer to that. And I think that actually is one of the big questions this year. Does Russia have some kind of countermeasure they can develop to mitigate this threat? If they don't, I think it's going to be a really big issue. Another kind of really important factor is Starlink and the loss of Starlink for Russia. Back when it was cut off in January, you might remember Russia started putting Starlinks on BM-35s, BM-70s, and also Molnia. And Molnia, again, is very cheap, kind of fixed wing FPV. Normal one costs maybe $500. You can throw a Starlink on that thing, and you can fly it, hit targets, 50 kilometers past the front line. And EW is not that effective against it, and so it was a really big issue. Since the blockage, though, Russia's lost that kind of operational depth strike capacity because they can't really target things beyond 50 kilometers very often. They still have Lancets and other things, but just not the same dynamic. Since the last 2-3 months, Ukraine really has this really significant advantage of operational level depth fires that Russia really can't compensate for. And I think this is a really significant kind of development in the battlefield this year.
I want to get into that kind of middle strike area that's getting more and more attention right now. But to kind of play into that, one of you guys, Rob, you mentioned here and I've got the graphic pulled up from the Second Combined Arms Army. You mentioned that the kill zone was not expanded to the 10 to 15 kilometer range, and then the most kills are happening in, I think you said 1.5 kilometers or less. I feel like we keep hearing that the kill zone is broader. Are we conflating terms here? Yeah. I feel like I've heard multiple times that it's 10 to 20 to 40 kilometers at places. Maybe kill zone is not the right way to describe it, but like gray area maybe?
Frankly speaking, I don't really like this definition, kill zone, because in my humble opinion, if he says that, okay, we have a kill zone like up to 5 or 10 kilometers, it should be done in that way where your enemy is not able to hold the line, where he is not able to move, where he's not able to do rotations, to send reinforcements, to use any types of vehicles, UGVs or whatsoever. We don't
shut off. Like shut off.
And it means that for me, kill zone, it's also when the enemy soldiers are not able to hide anywhere because everything is destroyed. They don't have tree lines. The area is mined. Some other kind of engineering preparations, let's say in this way, and only that we can say is that yes, you have a kill zone. Right now we have let's call it an increased zone of observation and striking, where yeah, exactly, you will be more likely hit by something if you've been spotted. But in the same time, for example, my folks at Le Mans direction, they had their position 5 kilometers from the front line, and they had rotations every 10 days, using armed vehicle for that. On nightly basis, we used UGVs for the supplement of our drone crews with ammo, food, water, whatsoever. And I need to say that for 1 year, they were hit 0 times by Russian FPV crews. So how can we say that we have a so-called kill zone in that case? Of course, it's not because, not only because that Russian reconnaissance at the tactical level is quite bad, it's also because we used better conditions for rotations, we used different kind of roads, so we were analyzing what we are doing. But still, 5 kilometers from the front line, it's not that much. People usually like to say that everything what is under this distance will be destroyed and etc. But as you can see, we have rotations, supplement, and feeling quite not bad. Of course, it depends on the part of the front line. That's also true. There's some areas on the front line, it's much harder for the Russian side for our side to do logistics. That's true. But it's only in a couple of fronts.
Yes, I mean, I agree with you. Kill zone, I think, is a term that has different connotations for different people, right? And I saw an article maybe last month saying the kill zone's been expanded to 100 kilometers, and it's like, no, not really, unless unless we're counting, Ukraine is hitting things, thousands of kilometers into Russia. I don't know if we'd count everything there as kill zone. I mean, it really depends on what kind of target you are and how much threat there is to you. And as Dima said, it depends on the front line, right? So in places where Rubicon's operating, right, they can operate, 20, 30 kilometers past the front line. When they're not operating there, Russia lacks that usually capability to operate that kind of depth. I think, I can the very rough way I just describe it. I think from 0 to 5 kilometers past the front line, that's something where you might say, okay, any target that's identified, the other side will try and send FPV after it, right? Infantry, vehicles, UGVs. There's enough FPVs in that area where you can, go after almost any target there. If it's, 5 to 10 kilometers, infantry won't always be targeted, right? So if you're walking, by yourself, an FPV might not think you're a most important enough target. Keep in mind, it takes about a minute for an FPV to fly about a kilometer, right? So it takes some time, the further you get back of how responsive you can be to target things. But it depends on what area you're on. And then further back from there, more than 10 kilometers, right? If you're in a vehicle, if you're in a particularly valuable vehicle, one of my friends when he was in Pokrovsk like last winter, he would wait until he saw a BMP driving forward, and then he'd just follow behind it in his like pickup truck because he knew any FPV is going to go after the BMP and not him, and that was his kind of way of being safe to get into the Pokrovsk direction. So the amount of kind of threat to you is really relative. It depends where you are on the front line, but it depends what kind of target you are. And yeah, I wouldn't say it's a real kill zone of 15 kilometers. In some places, like in Pokrovsk direction, where there's geometries are kind of difficult because Ukraine was fighting from a partial encirclement in some areas, then then absolutely it's much more difficult. So like in Kaztaha, even getting a UGV into Kaztaha right now is very difficult. They usually get destroyed. They usually won't be able to make a mission in and out. And so you have to walk very, very far distances to get in there. But if you're an infantryman walking into Kaztaha, you're probably okay, from FPVs at that kind of distance. So again, it really depends. The term is not very precise. I think we often make graphics that try and give people a sense of like this is exactly how it is everywhere. And in reality, it always varies for a variety of different variables.
I think people are going to be leaning on the Two Marine Substack to come up with the right terminology there. Then it's open for the taking is something between kill zone and engagement zone. I've used it in that sense, so it's making me think more about how that term is used because you're right. There's a big difference between you can hit something at 70 kilometers and everything that pokes its head above ground is going to get hit with multiple FPVs. That is drastically different, and we're kind of conflating those two. I think more.
And I would like to add a short remark. Let's recall what happened in 2022, 2023. We, for example, had our infantry positions, and they were constantly under artillery fire from the Russian from the Russian side, by artillery fire, by tanks, by infantry fighting vehicles, motors, and etc. But did we call that those a couple of kilometers from the front line was a kill zone back then? I don't think so. And also, for example, if we used pickups for rotation or supplement, of course, they were spotted by Russian Mavic crews. And after it happened, Russians used a lot of artillery shells against this tree line and were targeting this position because they knew that, well, they had a rotation, they had a supplement, and etc. But we didn't call this a kill zone back then. But everything was the same, but just with other types of weapons. So this terminology appeared in 2024, I assume, and unfortunately no one explained us, soldiers, what does it mean and how to achieve this so-called kill zone. It just sounds quite not bad, maybe dangerous for journalists, but in real life...
I was going to say, it makes for a good headline, yeah. How does this all tie into the middle strike that we're hearing more and more about? I feel like in 2026, that became the hot topic. It sounds like from this 5, 10, even 20 kilometer range, all of a sudden there's a heavy focus on 40, 50. I haven't really seen it defined, but in that ballpark, how does that tie into what you saw from the kind of Russian drone line experiment in 2020?
Well, finally, it's happened. It happens that we paid our attention to this zone that wasn't under fire since 2023, because for this kind of targets, we used to use, for example, HIMARS missiles. Unfortunately, we don't have them much, and right now, because of electronic warfare, we need to use from 2 to 3 missiles per target, which is quite expensive for us to be able to strike it. But again, it also depends, because days ago, my friend in Kursk area, they found the Russian S-300V anti-aircraft system. They called for the HIMARS, and they managed to hit this just with one missile. It was destroyed. Because this area is not that covered by Russian electronic warfare as, for example, Pokrovsk direction or Gulapilya direction in the Zaporizhia area. So far, if SpaceX wouldn't block Starlink for Russia, we would see those so-called middle strikes from both sides. I'm kind of partly touching also this question about Starlink blockage. Rob and I will write an article about that. Because Russians started using those different kind of drones. Rob mentions them: BM-35, BM-70, Molniya, Geran drones, also Gerbera drones, ISR drones, and they placed Starlinks on them, so they were kind of invulnerable to our employee warfare. They were able to fly much deeper than it used to be, and it became quite a big issue for us. They started targeting our logistics, especially from Pavlograd. As far as I remember, at the beginning of 2025, it became quite a dangerous kind of ring bell for us. But thankfully to SpaceX, it happens that they blocked this opportunity for them, and only us right now, at least, are able to use them. And right now we are targeting a lot of their anti-aircraft systems, ammunition depots, drone ports. For example, at the Donetsk airport, which is used for launching Piran drones and Gebero types of drones against different kind of targets inside of Ukraine, mostly at tactical level, because from Donetsk airport, Russian unit Grom Cascade is launching them, and they're working at operational tactical level in Ukraine, while the other unit, which is called also Grom Cascade, is working at kind of strategic level, targeting Kyiv and critical facilities of Ukraine. Maybe Rob would like to add something.
Yeah, I mean, I think this is one of the criticisms from a year ago, 2 years ago, that some people in Ukraine had, that basically, they're focusing too much on deep strike, but not operational strike. And it's never been a problem of intelligence, right? The Ukrainians know where a lot of targets are. They just didn't have the capacity to hit them. And they do now, right? And they've been saying this, right? Ukrainians have been saying, if you give us that's why they want to attack them, they want other weapon systems. Well, with FP2s have like 100 kilogram warhead, right? So it's a big warhead. They're producing them in large quantities. It's also a variety of like other loitering missions like Bulava, Ram 2X, HX2, other kind of variants, Hornet from Eric Schmidt's company.
Ukrainian D3, sorry, it's also where this one.
And so those that we have smaller warheads, those are things that can hit a vehicle and knock out a vehicle, whereas FP2 is something that can hit a, command post or hit a building and really kind of level a building. So the combination of these and the way people have described it here is that there's kind of a heavy middle strike and like a light middle strike. And again, it's not a technical term, right? But heavy middle strike with FP2s, you can hit really big targets and be confident you're going to destroy it. You can knock out a warehouse, something along those lines. The light middle strike, you can knock out a vehicle, right? And but quantities are increasing quite a bit. A lot of Ukraine defense industry obviously is very innovative. They've been working on these things for a while. The demand has been here for a while, and I think partially with Starlink, which enables just a really kind of high fidelity connection to even at significant depths. It's enabling Ukraine to do a lot of things, and so that's a really huge technological advantage they have over the Russians. Also, I think at this point there are a lot of Western defense companies who have, I think, finally recognized we have to test our equipment here, and it's not just kind of like you provide a kind of system, you're not allowed to manipulate it, but instead companies are bringing over like boutique kind of technological capabilities that you can then improve existing Ukrainian systems. So again, Russia just can't kind of compete with U.S., Europe, like top technology. So that kind of fusion of the best Ukrainian defense minds, the defense industry here is becoming much more mature. Again, most of these companies are new companies that did not exist 3 years ago. Plus, getting this kind of Western capital as well as Western expertise, I think that gives Ukraine a kind of long-term advantage here, and that's why I think the trend is going to stay positive, even though Russia will adapt to everything we're seeing, and that they will try to develop countermeasures.
You guys are just getting started with Substack. I love it. I think it's a great idea. What can we keep an eye out for here in the next couple weeks or months? Articles or topics you're looking to cover?
Well, as I mentioned, definitely Starlink blockage. We will continue with online update. We also have this kind of idea to write more about Russian units. With in terms of the structure, maybe some advantages and disadvantages, maybe some something about their tactics, to provide like this kind of unique info from the boots on the ground. I also think that we will touch this Miltech companies who are working in Ukraine, Ukrainian one, European, American. We'll have interviews with them. I think we also analyze those a couple times mentioned middle strike drones, the advantages and disadvantages, prices, accuracy. So I think it might be interesting.
Yeah, a variety of things. I'm gonna make Dima do a update every couple weeks or so. I don't know. We'll see how much I can make him work. That's his work. Some of this general warfare stuff, right? What was the role of tanks? Are tanks obsolete? Is artillery obsolete? That's a conclusion people have drawn. I will tell you, it's not a conclusion people in Ukraine I hear from, right? So assault units actively are using tanks. They're actively developing new techniques to use tanks. I personally believe we're going to see some successful Ukrainian operations this year. I think based on like what we're seeing with Putiata and Kupiansk, there really is an opportunity where Russian lines are not that strong. And if Ukraine kind of fixes some command and control issues, really works the organizational stuff, I think they could potentially push Russia back in some directions, including with armor. But aside from that, things about the Russian military developments, technological developments, and then talking to defense companies about what they're working on, and just basically things from the war that maybe you don't see on Twitter, right? So some of the non-public source kind of information, because there's a lot of things that you can't see just from Twitter by itself, even though there's a ton of information, and we want to try and kind of plug in the gaps of things you might not be able to see.
Yeah, despite the fact that I fought with the help of drones for 4 years, because this is how I started my military career 4 years ago, and despite this fact, I believe in artillery, I believe in tanks, in armor. I am not this kind of person who thinks that drones are absolute, they are dominating everything. You just need, in my humble opinion, drones, this is threats and opportunities. Before using armor and armor, first of all, tanks, you need to do some kind of, let's call it, proper preparations for that. And we have positive examples that happened in the end of last year and at the beginning of this year when it happened. The usage of armor, tanks without losses. And as Rob said, we definitely will see something from the Ukrainian side.
I would also say the reverse is also an issue where some people are arguing in Western kind of defense journals that there's not much to learn from Ukraine, that FPVs are a fad, that, the Western military could handle this quite easily. And I also don't think that's true either. So I think there's this kind of balance of going, okay, our existing capabilities are all obsolete, right? It's all stupid, or, none of the new technologies is important and so on. And I think we're seeing, with the IDF in Lebanon right now, we're seeing FPVs used. It's clearly an issue for the IDF. IDF was kind of one of the leaders in active protection systems for armor. Clearly, it's not a foolproof solution. And, I was watching to see with Iran whether or not we were going to deploy these Marines into Iran. And that was a big concern of mine. Was, are we ready for FPVs? Are we ready for fiber optic drones? Do we have the right infrastructure ready? And I have no doubt, the U.S. military can adapt very quickly. But the real priority is to make sure we don't lose guys on day one, because we could have kind of learned things from this war that we didn't.
It is a shocking amount of change in a short period of time. It's impossible to keep up with. So thank you guys for what you're doing, for documenting this and then sharing it with people so we all around the world can learn. Rob, Dima, thank you guys so much for your time and hope to do this again soon.
Yeah, man. Thanks for having us.
All right, so thank you so much to Rob and Dima for taking the time to walk through all of that today. If it wasn't abundantly clear during that conversation, these guys are an absolute wealth of knowledge. And fortunately, for all of us, they're continuing to document what they're seeing and put it out there for the world to see. The place they're doing that right now is for free on Substack under 2 Marines. That link in the description and pinned comment below. That's all we got for now. Thanks for watching, and I'll see y'all next time.